we go.
And Pete just signed in. So Pete, we were hoping you would welcome everybody and start introductions. You can hear me?
Yeah, I'm multitasking right now, Julie. I told Malcolm earlier I can't really commit to that because I'm preparing for another meeting right now. But I'll look
Okay.
in.
All right, Malcolm, why don't you just take it away?
Sounds like a plan. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. My name is Malcolm. I am the community organizer with TTF Watershed. I'm very happy that you guys make it out, making time for this. We really appreciate it. And I'll pass it along to Dorian.
Hello, I'm Dorian. I'm community watershed leader. Good to see everybody. I will pass it on to Nick.
Hi, Nick Upmeyer from Natural Lands. I don't know, should we start our presentation now so Anne can make hers, or are we all introducing ourselves? Is that the idea?
Let's just all introduce ourselves.
Okay.
And for folks that are Tacony Creek Park keepers, please say where you live and something about the park. So I'm gonna shoot this over to Anne, who can introduce herself.
Okay, I'm Ann Hutchinson. I'm a senior planner at Natural Lands, a land conservancy, and I had the honor of being part of the team that pulled together the Tacony Creek Park master plan. You'll hear more from Nick and I later. And I will pass it on to Marianne.
Morning or good afternoon. I'm Marian Dalk. I work with Parks and Recreation in the Stewardship Division. So I support friends groups across the city, including Tacony Creek Park. I'll pass it to Dallas.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dallas Herbert. I'm a Longcrest neighborhood. I live in Longcrest, and I'm on the 215 steering committee, 215 People's Alliance steering committee. Now I'll pass it to Frank. You're on mute, Frank.
While Frank fixes his technical support, Julie, do you want to go next real quick?
Yeah, sure. I'm Julie Slavitt. I'm the executive director of the TTF Watershed Partnership. And I'm going to pass it over to Fiona.
Hi, I'm Fiona, and I live in just down the street from Dallas. Yeah, I'm in the Longcrest area, and I kind of back up to the creek, kind of. So yeah, and I'll pass it to Nick. Did you go already?
I did go, thank you.
I'll pass it back to Frank. You can't get it on.
All right, they seem to be having some difficulties. So do we want to pull up the agenda?
Yes. Give me
So
one.
people can see that. And as people sign in, we'll wait till we have another group to introduce themselves. I think the first topic I can't remember, but this first topic is to talk about the master plan. Nope, it's for Marian. So Marian, will you do an update? We thought we'd give you some time right at the beginning.
Yes, happy to do so. So I know that TTF has been in close communications with our sustainability office about some improvements throughout the park. So you may know that the community cans pilot was launched, I would say, late summer. So there's several cans along the trail that TTF has been servicing, and that seems to be going really well and keeping trash off the trail. So glad to see that's going well. Parks and Rec also installed some fencing by the Adams Avenue section of the park, because that was a site where we had a lot of tire dumping, and that seems to have been really effective. So we're happy to see that that has been working so far. We unfortunately continue to see a lot of dumping on the Olney field, and the Sustainability Office is currently looking at getting bids and quotes for installing guardrails throughout that field, because I know currently there's still 3 tire dumps back there, and it's been constantly an issue. One positive development there is that we've been partnering with the streets department to install cameras around areas with hotspots. So there was a security camera installed at the Olney field, so that way if anyone notices any short dumping happening, please let us know right away with the date and the time, and we can, go into the camera feed and see if we can have any footage to prevent some of that. Otherwise, we've just been responding as people, cut locks on gates to make sure that those gates are locked again. We were helpful in removing 2 vehicles that had been dumped in the creek in the fall, so thankfully those have been removed. And currently our staff is reinstalling some signs that were taken down. So those are the things we've been working on our end. Are there any questions or concerns you want to bring forward?
That's really great, Ms. Pete. That's really great, Marianne. All the work you're doing, we really appreciate that. I mean, one of the things I notice is that they don't cut the locks. What they do is they cut the chains.
Right.
And so my sort of, repetitive statement is that the gate that works the best, I think, is the one and I know, there's expensive or whatever, but the one at Bingham Street, it has a bar that goes down through the gate, and then you put the lock at the bottom of the bar. And that way there's no chain to cut, because the chains are, I mean, they're constantly cutting the chains. So chains I think are ultimately pretty ineffective if someone really wants to get in. But I appreciate all the work you're doing. I mean, these guardrails at Olney will be great.
Thank you for that, Pete. It's great to have that input.
That's the gated Tabor in Olney, the one that we paid for and installed. That's one of those drop bars. So there isn't any chain there. It's just the lock. Anything else for Marianne? Thank you, Marianne. It's really great to have the back and forth and everything. I actually have some updates, but I'm going to wait. Marissa and Dalila, do you want to introduce yourselves?
Sure. I am Marissa McMickens Blair. I'm the Chief Strategies Officer for the Olney Culture Lab, and I'm standing in today for Ambrose Liu, our director, who is on sabbatical.
And Dalila, I see you. You want to introduce yourself?
Can you hear my dog?
All right, there's quite a puppy.
Yeah.
Oh, Frank, you and Betty want to introduce yourselves?
All right. We're Frank and Betty, and we're in the Harrogate section of Philadelphia, Tioga and Kensington, and it's nice seeing the park kind of the way it is these days, rather than a inaccessible area that it was years ago.
So I think we can move ahead for Ann and Nick to do their presentation. So, we spent a lot of time with our folks from Natural Lands over the past few years, getting this master plan done. And we think it's a pretty amazing product, and we are so pleased that we were able to work with them. So the master plan is actually posted on the Keepers page. You know, there's a master plan page. The document itself is on the page, and then there's, you know, the listing of the meetings and the master and the there's recordings and presentations and everything, so that there's a place where all this stuff lives. If people are really interested in a printed version, we would be happy to provide those. We're going to get them to the libraries. I know we haven't done that yet, but what we want to do, you know, the Albany Library and Frankfurt Library, all those libraries should have copies, in case anybody wants to go in there and look at them. So we're excited. So Ann, do you want to, Ann and Nick, you want to jump in?
Yeah, we'll take you through the plan. Thank you so much. It's good to see so many of you again. You met Nick and I. There were other members of our team who aren't here tonight. Ann Toole from Toole Recreation Planning looked at staffing and programming. Kelsey Boyd at Natural Lands also looked at land management. And people behind the scenes at Michael Baker International did some cost estimating for us. Next slide, please. I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that this was funded by DCNR, which is the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, the William Penn Foundation, and the Scattergood Foundation. As important as those funders, all of you on this call and many volunteers in the community give hours and hours of their own time making this park a better place. And our thanks to you for caring about the park and talking to us during this plan. Next slide, please, Nick. Our client is TTF, Julie and her team, and ultimately Philadelphia Parks and Recreation. When we started writing this plan, it really became apparent to me that this was such a critical city park. If you look at the population of the 5 neighborhoods that adjoin the park, it's over 150,000 people, which if it was its own municipality, it would be the 3rd largest municipality in all of Pennsylvania. The only 2 places that are bigger are the city of Philadelphia as a whole and Pittsburgh. Even Allentown has a smaller population. We had William Penn Foundation money, and we used that to try to show some early progress on the ground. So one of those 2 pilot projects were the wonderful people of the park signs and the celebration when the signs were put up that the Albany Cultural Lab provided. Next slide, Nick. And the other were these Nature Explorer kits to get kids out and using the park. Next slide. Because when we listened to people, we heard, didn't matter what neighborhood we were in, didn't matter who we were talking to. People want to connect with nature. They want to use the park as a place to relieve stress, to get a little fit, walk around. And people are concerned that the park doesn't feel as safe as it should. It's not as well maintained as they'd like it to see. They want to see restrooms and trails. They want more programs in addition to the wonderful ones now. They're willing to participate in cleanups, help with planting and festivals. And everyone thought that spending more money on safety was an important goal. Next. So we've worked hard to make sure the plan covered those 4 topics: better maintenance, increased presence in the park so more people will use the park, partnerships with other organizations and the park keepers and all the people who help take care of this park, and more personnel. I can't emphasize enough that staffing and maintaining this park is as important as the physical improvements that Nick will talk to you about. TTF already does an absolutely incredible job at providing programming. But we think with additional staff, both at TTF and at the city level, they could have more regular after-school programs and an ongoing presence during peak user hours. So our plan calls for staffing in the form of a park director. The director of TTF has a lot to do besides just look over this park, as well as a superintendent with maintenance staff and someone to help direct education and all those programs we talked about. So I'm going to let Nick talk through the physical improvements and the 2 areas we suggested as 2 sort of pilot or first phase areas. We have intentionally tried to provide a design that it's not the $250 million budget of FDR Park. It's a much more pragmatic approach to making the gateways and the edges of the park feel more welcoming as a first step. And with that, I'll let Nick take it away, and then we'll take your questions because we're really here to listen to your comments and questions.
Great, thank you very much, Anne. As she notes, I don't want to spend too much time going through this. As we said before, we've met some of you at previous meetings, but of course we do want to hear from you, so we'll do questions at the end. So you can see here from the overview of how we're thinking about the park was the idea of splitting it into different sectors. We thought this is going to provide some an equitable approach to improvements in the park, thinking about what's needed in all the abutting neighborhoods, as well as giving us a framework for, as Anne talked about, sort of the management and presence in the park, because, you know, there's sort of again, TTF's excellent work aside, there's a bit of a vacuum of authority sometimes of, you know, who's responsible and who's here. Because we think the most important thing to really move the function of the park forward is reaching that critical mass of people in the park. The more people that are there, the more people are using it in a positive way and interacting and building, you know, excitement and community in the park, the better it's going to function, and the more you're going to have sort of people buy in, much as your group does. You know, we want to expand that sort of sense of ownership over this really critical asset in the place where people live. As Anne notes, it serves a really huge section of the city's population. So we want to make sure that it's a place that's welcoming, that it's you know, legible when you get in there, you know where you're going, and it's not some mystery of sort of darkened area of trees. And to that point, we found in some areas that the gateways, you know, some of these have been improved, but some could do better. So that's something we recommended throughout every sector, is that gateways be improved. And as Anne notes, it's not you know, it's not a super reimagining. It's really kind of basic stuff, like making sure that vegetation is maintained, cut back so you have visibility, allowing for safety, and, you know, giving the impression that the park is a place that's being cared for. So clearing back vegetation where it gets out of control, putting things in like lighting on the gateways, welcoming signage that's consistent throughout the park. These are things that we're recommending basically anywhere where you have an opportunity to step into the park, because some of those gateways, you know, it can look like it's maybe not the most safe or inviting place to go. So as our approach is to make this an overall more welcoming and kind of enticing place to be, the most important place to start with those is on the edges. You know, you sort of dip your toes in the water, so to speak, and then that gets you interested and excited to explore more of the park. And again, the more people we have doing that, the greater sort of critical mass of park users, the more it's going to become a welcoming and safer feeling place. So we did focus on recommendations for those gateways. We also looked at creating better connections within the park. A good example here in Sector A is the Hamilton Nedrow Field. You know, this is a great set of playing fields where you have some really positive use from the groups that are playing there, but it's not connected to the trail. You know, it's sort of its own entity on the edge. And we want it to be part of a larger park system. So often we'll recommend things like connecting trails. You know, there are informal trails, but we want to make those connections more formalized, you know, with signage, and to make sure you know where you're going. You can expect, oh, well, you know, quarter of a mile that way to Adams Avenue. I know where I'm going here, or this far to get to Rising Sun Avenue. We also looked at things like crossings for the major thoroughfares that bisect the park, recommending things like green stormwater bump outs that can function as sort of traffic calming measures to make sure you have safe movement between different sectors when you're having to cross sort of larger roads. Again, here's Sector B, only we talked about, and I'm going to talk a little more about that soon. But again, you have these sort of assets, things like the Olney Field or the Garland Street Playground, that don't have really a meaningful connection to the rest of the park. So we wanted to create a sense of coherence within the park. I know a lot of the keepers are interested in the ecological health of the park too. You know, this is really a critical green space in neighborhoods where there's frankly a lack of that. And so we wanted to make sure that we're aware, certainly in partnership with the water department, of calling out areas where restoration needs to take place in floodplains and along the riparian buffers of the park. We recommended a minimum 150-foot riparian buffer the whole length of the creek to make sure that the park is providing the ecosystem services to the maximum amount possible, and that is, you know, collecting stormwater runoff before it gets into the stream through the use of vegetation. So, you know, I think we really focused on the social aspect, but certainly the ecological function is something that we talked about. And if you look at the larger report, Anne mentioned we have a colleague who's an ecologist, and she put together a really terrific stewardship plan for the park, including a schedule and list of priorities for every different plant community that you're finding within the park, to give a guide basically to the city and to TTF, so you can go about that stewardship of the ecological function in a coherent way. You can see here in Sector C, again, sort of similar stuff. We looked at, again, things like improving existing sort of unique ecological features, such as the meadow we have here, and enhancing existing assets. So, for example, there are two playing fields by East Loudon here that are really, you know, hard pounded, sun blasted kind of pieces of land. So we thought it was important to recommend things like trees to provide shade, seating for people who are visiting, really enhance the experience for, you know, people who are not only doing active recreation, but who want to engage in passive recreation, that is, you know, basically sitting and enjoying a natural space. We also looked at things like, again, in concert with the water department, green stormwater infrastructure installed in a few locations, and even some off-street parking, recognizing that that's something that can be valuable for visitors to the park. Finally, Sector D is unfortunately maybe our least exciting part of the plan, because most of it is taken up by the Juniata Golf Course. This is a bit of a fraught place because it's you know, a large, I think 125 acre area that is currently managed by the golf course. And so it's a lot for the city to think about taking on the management of that space. That said, we have heard from the new council person in this district that they're interested in exploring a master plan for the golf course itself. Is it the most equitable use of the land in the neighborhood where it's located? And again, thinking about ecological function, you can sort of see in a lot of places here in the golf course, grass goes right up to the edge of the creek, which is not something we want to see when we're thinking about stormwater management and water quality. But again, we did think about connections to existing assets and also connections to the larger trail network in the city. So, going on to the Frankfurt Greenway Trail from here, we thought it was important to make sure that's a strong and legible connection for visitors to the park. So given all that as our sort of overview of the plan, I did also want to call out what we're calling, pilot areas. So these are two areas that we identified as we thought were really promising for areas to think about, again, introducing a welcoming area and taking what are already some great assets and trying to enhance those to improve public access and public use of the space. So, someone had mentioned, Marianne, had mentioned, dumping at Olney Field. It's a great space. And when I visited there were people there, enjoying sort of a passive recreation space. But we thought it could be enhanced a bit. We do want to keep it passive recreation. You can see the field itself. We're not proposing to put anything there, but a walking path around its perimeter with benches, considering putting, formalizing a volleyball court that neighbors have already used, doing things like street trees and putting in crosswalks. I did see people sort of sprinting across here and not having a safe way to connect from their neighborhood. And then again, thinking about formalizing some of those trail connections. There's a nice seating area by the bus stop here, but it doesn't really connect to the field. So thinking about how people access the park, be it from a bus stop or from their own neighborhood. And again, things like street trees kind of announce that you're gonna be coming up to a green space and come this way because it's going to be inviting here. We had recommended putting bollards along here, and so that's great to hear that the city's going forward with guardrails, because we understand that vehicle access for the purpose of short dumping is really a big issue in this area. But we think it's already a pretty strong use that could be enhanced and made, a pretty premium park space to, again, activate the edge here and get people into and using the park more regularly. And then the second area that we looked at was this area, the intersection at Whitaker and Loudon. There's a lot of great assets here, but we think they're kind of underfunded and under-realized. They could really be improved. Again, doing something about the sports fields, which are not in great shape, and including things like a pavilion, which is something we recommended in all 4 sectors as sort of a base of operations for the park personnel that we're proposing be active in the park. So if you have, what would be a park ambassador or maybe a ranger, they have somewhere that's sort of a center of authority and presence where people know, oh, here's someone I can speak to if I want to sort of talk to them about the park, and storage for maintenance equipment, that sort of thing, including things like lighting and cameras. And it may be a long shot, but we did recommend restrooms too. We think that's important to provide some sort of basic amenities to park visitors. And again, thinking about things like ecological health, there's a nice meadow here, but it could certainly be improved. Green stormwater infrastructure, which provides, of course, stormwater control, but also can be really beautiful when they're done correctly. And then things like pedestrian safety too. Whitaker is a little dicey to cross, so we're recommending, again, some stormwater bump outs here to not only beautify that connection, but also make it safer for pedestrians. So those were our recommendations. I will say, to clarify, because sometimes people will say, well, great, let's do it. So a master plan is really a high-level document that lets us say, what should we be doing here? This isn't ready to be constructed, but this gives us sort of a pathway forward, that can be utilized to do things like go out and get grant money to, for example, pay someone to do an engineering plan, which you would need for this type of improvement. So, you know, these were our best recommendations. We can't do it all at once, but as Ann mentioned, we think it's modest by comparison, because, you know, a lot of what we heard from respondents is they need some of these sort of basic park functions. So we think these are going to be an equitable approach to some sort of eye-catching and really exciting improvements to begin with. So those are our recommendations to get started. But as I said, at this point in the process, we take this plan and through things like this meeting with you all who are championing the park, go out and build momentum, you know, politically and amongst your peers in the public. So that is our plan for the park, and I think we can now turn it over to questions if you all have questions about anything we presented. And if not, that's okay too. As Julie mentioned, you know, the document itself, which is 170 pages, I think, should be available to you now. And, you know, even if you don't get a printed copy, I would certainly recommend that you all check out the document, which I believe TTF is hosting on their site, you know, as a way to sort of build your excitement for it. And again, I think it's important for you all to be able to communicate with others who care about the park and want to be involved in the next stage of its improvements.
Yeah, I think it looks really good. And I like the way you're trying to connect the different areas, because I think that will cut down on it feeling kind of scary, because you know you'll have different ways to get out. I mean, not that not that it's terrifying to be there, but then at least you know there's different ways to go in and go out. So then you have you know, you don't feel like you're going to go around a corner and then be, you know, somewhere where you don't know where you are. So yeah, thank you. I was wondering on the status of that golf course. Is that part of the Tacony Creek Park, or is not the big golf course, but that driving range?
That is not part of the park. It's owned privately. And I mean, frankly, that is something that we think should be considered for acquisition, but you know, the city is stretched thin as regards to maintaining and stewarding parcels like that. So, you know, it's a bit of a fraught question. It would be a great parcel to connect. I'll say that. We certainly think that. But, you know, I think for particularly in that final sector, it was a little hard to go ahead and design something like that, because a lot would go into the city having to acquire and then manage that property. So I would say yes, they ought to be acquired, but you know, that's up to the city to kind of embrace that, I think.
Thank you. Yeah, I think just a quick comment. So when I was down there walking around, this is a while ago, there was a dog in the building there barking, and I think for me that made it kind of scary. I mean, not that I'm afraid of dogs, but it was obviously a guard dog. But it would be nice if it was possible for us to take that over.
Dallas has his hand up.
Yes. Everything, your plan is exactly what I've been working on. The entrance to the park at the bottom of Snake Road and Snake Road, 5600 Newtown Avenue. Now, I've been trying to keep it clean and safe for the neighbors from Longcrest to be able to get down that hill safely and into the park. So I'm trying to talk to you guys about giving me a little help here to beautify the place and stop people from dumping. I mean, you guys got there's a lot of you with some good ideas and things like that, and we can use all the help we can. It's just like you're saying, to get more people into the park, Well, Longcrest neighbors cannot access the park going down that road because the road is so dangerous for people dumping and tires and stuff.
Mhm.
So I just wanted to keep it in you guys' mind that Snake Road exists right over there. And it is part of what you were saying, but you're talking about doing other parts and not that. And we right next door.
Mhm.
So I feel that you ought to try to adopt some of Snake Road stuff and what you got going on in order to all work together. You know, so
Yeah, and you know, I remember speaking to you about this at the last meeting we attended, and that is included in the plan, certainly, because you're right, it's the only connection for all of Longcrest, which is a big neighborhood that, you know, doesn't have a great or really much of a pedestrian connection. So that's certainly included in the plan. And you know, again, with our recommendations for those 2 pilot areas, those are kind of bigger projects. And those are not proposed to say that that's more important than anything else that we're looking at. So you can rest assured that Newtown Avenue, excuse me, is included in the plan. And we do realize that's a pretty critical connection to get Longcrest in there, and is frankly a problem area that needs to be addressed.
well, I hope you guys keep me informed when you decide to do something because you know, I report to the Longcrest Civic Association once a month, and people want to know what's going on. They can't wait to use this little piece here in order for them to feel, you know, welcomed and everything. So keep me informed and I can keep them informed because all that you said, you didn't mention Snake Road. So I'm just saying.
Well, like I said, I can't say everything that's in the plan in 10 minutes, but it is in there. You can see it here. And if you look up the full plan, you can check that out too.
Okay. Thank you.
So, and Dallas, I mean, when, you know, working on this plan, we really consider the 215 People's Alliance a partner. And, you know, and you a partner, I think would be happy to come to the Longcrest Civic and talk to folks. You know, I mean, the plan is, you know, it's going to take a while, but in the meantime, there are certainly things that we can do to try to make it safer and cleaner. You know, when stuff gets dumped at that gateway, which happens all the time, we report that to the city. You know, we report that to Marion. We do our best to get stuff picked up there. You know, long term, it needs to be a much better gateway. You know, it's not safe. There's no place for people to stand. And so much of the park is like that, where there's no sidewalks and there's really no edge or anything. But we are not intending on doing anything without you and the 215 People's Alliance in that area. You know, this is a short-term and long-term. This is, like Nick was saying, this is the beginning of a planning process. And, you know, so much of what's important is in the nitty-gritty details. So, you know, when we start looking at more specific plans and funds to make these changes, there'll be a whole other community process to say, you know, what do we want exactly at this site? What do we want it to look like? We actually, so because, I'm going to digress a little bit, but because you contacted us about the effort to get the city to allow short haulers to bring their trash to the sanitation convenience centers. You know, you reached out to us about that. We sent some letters to city council and to the mayor. And we did receive a response apparently today from Councilman Phillips' office. So we aren't going to meet with Councilman Phillips' office without you. Because, you know, you only get this stuff done with more than, you know, with partners, right? With different organizations. And for him to hear from us and the 215 People's Alliance and the Longcrest Civic is much more effective. So, you know, again, the short term, and then, you know, the funding and the more long term, I think is what we're looking at.
Okay,
And
Julie.
you know,
I'll keep my pants on and
please do that.
and be patient be
Yeah.
patient. I'll be
We're
patient.
we're short-staffed right now. We don't have our stewardship assistant. And we're trying to hire for that position. If anybody knows somebody who would like to do that. You know, we're also in the process of, we're in a transition. So, you know, between the middle of March and the end of June, we will have a new executive director starting that I will overlap with. And I hope you all saw that announcement. And Justin DeBerdinis will be coming to work to lead TTF. And he is unbelievable, very skilled, very energetic, pretty relentless. And I think people are really going to be pleased with his relationships and his understanding and his knowledge. And I think he's really the one to sort of take the park to the next level. And he's very, very committed. We've already seen, I'll do this because this was at the end of the agenda. So I'll just let you know, because I think this is very good news, is apparently Parks and Recreation had a relationship with an organization. Oh my God, what did I do with it? Called the Center for Employment Opportunities. CEO, it's a national organization that does workforce development with folks that are formerly incarcerated. So there's a bunch of cities that they work in: Boston, Philadelphia, Atlanta, New York. And they were partnering with Parks and Rec, and there was a crew that needed to find another park to work in for the coming year. And Justin was contacted by somebody, you know, one of our really wonderful friends at Parks and Recreation, Sue Buck, a deputy commissioner, and sort of sent them over to us. And, you know, basically we said yes, because we would never say no. So there's a crew that will be joining us. You'll start seeing them on Monday. I'm not sure how many are in the crew. But this is a crew of adults who have a crew leader and get a lot of support services, so that, you know, they're successful. They have supportive services. They have job training. You know, it's a really good program. It's not just a job. It's a wrap around all of that. And they have a van, they have equipment. And they also have folks that they work with who are really skilled. Arborists, landscape folks, people who know a lot about trees and invasive plants and trash. And we're going to have them full-time for the next year. So we are in the process of coming up with projects for them. And, you know, these will, you know, I think the major focus at the beginning is going to be trash, and invasive removal, and, you know, some erosion control. So please, when you see these folks, again, they're starting on Monday. And right now they're going to be working pretty much they're going to start really above Tabor. So they're going to be in that area. You know, the challenge for us is, where do you put stuff? Marion's very familiar with this. Like, you know, we collect a lot of trash. We got to figure out where it's going to go, so that's not attracting other trash. And restrooms, you know, we don't have facilities. So we were able to work those out sort of for the north side of the park, and we're going to try to figure them out for the south side of the park, so we can accommodate and take care of these folks. So that's really good news. And I think that's just the beginning. So, and there'll be a presence, you know, which I think is, I mean, I haven't seen what they wear or anything like that yet. But it'll look like there'll be a crew of workers, natural lands workers within the park, that will be there every single day, every single weekday. And we're hoping that they'll support us at community events too. So I'm hoping this is just like a little iceberg, like the beginning of how much, how many really good things can come through in the next, the next few years. If anybody has more questions about the master plan, it is really wonderful, Ann and Nick, that you took the time to join us. I feel like every time we talk about this, more people get excited about it and notice specific things about it. And, we need you guys to talk to your neighbors and your elected officials. The way this is going to get funded is by a lot of elected officials helping us with a lot of grants and appropriations. That's how it's gonna be in chunks, so, we just need everybody to keep spreading the word. And again, with the Longcrest Civic or anybody else, we are happy to come out and talk about this with anybody.
Okay, well, I will talk to the executive board and let them know that you would come out. So we'll be in touch. And Julie, I'd like to say thank you for your work. It's phenomenal what you've done. You know what I mean? And we're gonna miss you. I know you're not leaving right away, but you will be missed. Thank you.
I'm not like dying or anything. I'll still be in.
I know you're
So
not
you'll see
dying.
me.
Go
You'll
smell the
see me.
roses. Okay.
Yeah, and Nick, I think you spoke at the meeting we had at Friends Hospital, right?
Yes, I did. Yep.
Yeah. So, one of the things I really liked that you said there was about needing critical mass among the people around the park, like enough people that are positive pro to the park and therefore sort of self-governing in terms of what goes on in their areas, with, ATVs and whatever else. They're self-governing in terms of like, hey, don't do that. We appreciate this area. We need this area for the kids and the families. And I think what Dallas is saying is spot on. I mean, and what Ann said about staffing is as important as physical improvements. I think even more generic, people are more important than physical improvements. So I think the connections with the civic associations, et cetera, is really one of the most important things that can happen. The people connections, because there are organizations and I've done things for the city for 40 years in the city, and you can like fund and do stuff, but unless you have those connections with the people, like you can completely sort of miss the boat. So I think that the whole discussion Dallas had is really, really important just all around the park, and maybe even gives a little bit of, maybe that should be a pilot area because you have a civic association that's so co-committed, not just from like what's best from an engineering or a park planning perspective, but where do you have like a civic association that's really gung-ho about helping to maintain the park? So, and just, just like where I'm at, we don't really have a gateway for our civic. So it's really not a great connection there because we don't really have a gateway, but up there, that would be, anywhere where there's a civic like that really wants to take ownership. I think that really lends weight to that being a pilot area.
Yeah, I think those are all great points. And I'll just reiterate, what we presented as pilot areas, that's not saying this is what's going to be done. Those were areas that we thought would be exciting areas to start, but you're absolutely correct, where you have things like the Longcrest Civic Association and 215 Alliance, that political will and organization is really going to get stuff done. Because this plan doesn't come with funding attached to it. It's a means by which to go out and get that money. So, when Dallas takes the plan in hand and 215 Alliance is talking to their council people and making some noise about it, you're going to be able to start generating that excitement and finding that funding to get it done. So yeah, I think that's a great point.
I think one of the things that I have found that's really effective is, I do monthly walks with people, and I try to, people express interest. I'm like, well, if you want to take a walk in the park, you can see what it's all about. So, if you have folks that are you know, that are ward leaders or committee people or civic leaders that you think, or, you know, they're a pastor or a teacher. Those are the kind of people would be very happy to take them for a walk. I mean, we walk from Cheltenham Avenue to Juniata Park. It's 3.2 miles. Not everybody has to do that. We can certainly do shorter walks, and that's a really good way for people. You know, there's nothing like seeing it that really makes a difference. And you know, so we're also really, as Pete said before he had to go to his other meeting, you know, getting people on the trail. The more people, the safer it is, the more vibrant it is. You know, that's so important. And, you know, we right now have 2 walking groups on Friday and Saturday mornings. And then we have running groups a few times a week. We would be happy to sponsor a walking group twice a day, every day. You know, I mean, the more people that walk, and people tend to not want to walk by themselves all the time, and we understand that, you know, that's really valid. So if there are, you know, if you want to start a group and we need to hire a leader, I mean, we pay the leaders, their time is really important, and they help with outreach. So if any of you are interested, any of you know somebody that's interested, you know, Thomas McHale is one leader on Saturday mornings, and Katie Leander is the Friday morning leader. Malcolm's is filling in for her because we're letting her have a break. But you know, there's plenty of days and times that I think there could be more of those folks in the park.
I got a question. Hello? You guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes, Sean, would you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Sean. I live over there by Pilot, what was it, Pilot A or something? It's one of the pilot areas with where you're suggesting the pavilion and the Boys and Girls Club is there.
Mhm.
But I was looking at the Juniata Golf Course, and I was a little confused during this talk because I thought that golf course was owned by the city. Is that wrong or right?
It is owned by the city, so it's part of the park. And you know, we went in expecting to include that as part of the master plan and did a kind of sketch with a lot of improvements in there. But the city gave us the message, which I don't think is outrageous, which is that, you know, the people are operating it as a golf course, and that's a huge burden that otherwise the city would be accepting to manage, you know, 100 acres. If you just say, let's kick the golf course out and this is now a park, that's a huge piece of land to take on. So I think we were disappointed that we got that message from them. But you know, that's not to say that it's always going to be that way. I mean, it was communicated to us recently that Councilperson Lozada is interested in doing a master plan for the golf course itself. But, you know, it is a political issue in terms of the organization that's been running the golf course for quite some time, and an issue of capacity for the city to be able to take that on. So in a perfect world, that would be its own big, beautiful park there. Sort of, as I mentioned, you know, in increasing the riparian buffer, and, you know, you could have all kinds of things happening in there. But the reality of it is it's difficult for the city to commit to taking that on as a management unit while they already have someone managing the space. So it's something that we would advocate for, and the plan does mention that, but they'd asked us not to show, you know, a skate park and a community garden and an amphitheater, whatever you could fit in there. That might be a more equitable use for the neighborhood surrounding it. The city wasn't quite ready to commit to it. But as I say, the council person in the district where the golf course is located has expressed interest in and started to consider what that would look like were the golf course to be redeveloped as park space.
Mhm. The golf course and the driving range are two separate properties.
Yeah.
The driving range is private. The golf course is owned by the city.
Oh yeah, I've researched the driving range. I know who owns it.
Mhm.
It's
We-
it
We
would be
do as
great to
well.
own that property. It's such a neat place. I think it's quite profitable potentially, but nobody's used it. I think it'd be an amazing event space.
So, so we know who owns it. It's currently leased, to somebody. It's not really, one of the reason you can't really do a lot there. It's a floodplain and it's a steep slope. There's not a lot you can do on that property because of where it is and how it's zoned next to the creek. So, that's sort of one issue. What we would like to see is that property is, removed from, it's currently, one of the issues is that that's a street there. It has to be a street because it's a commercial property. We would prefer that not be a business, that it be part of the park. And then the street is not a public street and people can't drive down that street into that area. It's part of the park. There aren't vehicles driving down there. It's really not safe, because people are basically driving along what is a trail. So we're not, I mean, and the neighborhood, TTF and the neighborhood are really not happy with that being a venue.
Well, a more compatible personality would be more. They're obviously not working with TTF. The people who lease that space, the people who own that building, which is the real estate company, don't care about the prop. They're not involved with TTF. So it's odd that they have this disconnect to me with the park. If I owned that property, I'd be very interested in collaborating and making it useful for reasons, but ultimately pitching the city to buy it and turn it over and potentially raise the building is quite a pitch. So who knows what's going to happen there.
The
But I
building
was
is
just
a
asked,
historic building as well.
how old is that building?
I don't know. It's that area is really historic. The Roland House is there. It's an old mill. The bridge
figure
is
it-
historic.
Like one of these grandfathered in kind of situations.
So there used to be a nursery there. It was a nursery on that property, and then it became the driving range. It's still owned by the owner of the driving range. Mr. Kim owns that property, and it's leased to somebody. But we would like to see that as part of the park, and not, it's really been a problem, and it's really been a problem for that area. And we don't want people driving over the bridge. I mean, the bridge needs to be protected too.
I was only getting to curious if there's some way of bridging connectivity into the Juniata Park through the golf course, since it is city owned, without interrupting the golf course itself. Or it's a very thin line there, and I don't know if the topography works well for foot trails, but you get what I'm saying? A way to enter the creek trail from Juniata Park without going out into the street. There's no way to do that, really, is there?
No, it's the other side of the Frankfurt Creek.
Right. That's all. I don't really oppose the golf course either. It's the least of my concerns about the park. Yeah, there's a lot of other improvements to be made before that it becomes important. But I don't have anything else. Going on mute.
So it seems like, Malcolm, it sounds like we're out of questions on the master plan. Again, it's linked on Dorian, put the link in the chat. We put the master plan on the master plan page on the Keepers website, which you should go to and share all the time with people. There's a lot of really good stuff on that website. And we put it up as I think we summarized the executive summary so people could see what that said and what's that. And then the plan and the appendices are in two different documents. Because there's a lot, there's a lot there. And again, we're going to get some copies printed. We'll get them to libraries. If people have, if you want us to get them to you to share with an organization, making copies if more people are going to see it, I think is great. And everyone who's on here, I don't know if you're all on Facebook. I am not. But we have a Tacony Creek Park Facebook page, and we would really like folks to share it and like it. It's a really good way for people to communicate with us about stuff going on in the park, positive and negative, and to share events and everything. So please be sure to do that as well. So TTF staff, do we have anything else? Natural Land staff? I'm sure people are hungry, so.
I don't have any of, I was just going to add one note about the master plan, as Julie mentioned. It's on the Keepers page. It's also on the TCP Keepers Facebook. So if you want to share it online as well, it's on if you go to the TCP Keepers Facebook, we have a post about that as well. So you can share it online.
Yeah, so we didn't want, I was concerned that we wouldn't have enough time to really talk about this, and sometimes we sort of run out of time if it's only an hour, so we decided to schedule it to make it a little bit longer so we would have time if people had more questions. I think everybody would be really happy if we ended the meeting now, unless somebody has anything to do. I know people on this call who have small children who probably would really like to put them in the bathtub right now. So we're done. Thank you, everyone.
You all so much. Yeah.
Thank you for joining.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good to be here.
Have a good
Thank you.
night. Enjoy your evening. Enjoy your dinner.